Hey everyone.
Hi, I'm Melissa Como, licensed therapist and board certified counselor. One important thing I've learned in my own life and working with individuals and couples is we experience more joy in our lives when we are in fulfilling and supportive relationships. Think about it. When something bad happens, you call on the people you know will be there. And when something really great happens, you want the people closest to you there to celebrate. This is the heart of my practice. At Heartfelt Counseling Center, we are here to help you learn the skills to have satisfying and successful relationships. We understand that relationships can feel complicated. Let's help you make it simple. Contact us today for a free consultation and follow us on social media where we talk all things relationships. Thanks for listening.
Hey everyone. I just wanted to go ahead and welcome everyone to my first show on YouTube. I've been doing IG all last year. Actually go and introduce myself formally for those that don't know me and for the recording. My name is Melissa Como. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of Florida. My specialty is relationship and couples, and I go by your favorite relationship expert on IG. And I was just saying that I have been doing IG lives all last year, focusing on Black love. And so I thought I'd go ahead and transition over to YouTube so I can catch more people and have the conversation be a little bit bigger for everyone on all platforms. And so tonight I am going to be talking with you all about Black love, reclaiming the narrative. And so if you know me, you know I like to kind of give a little background story as to kind of how I come up with all these topics and stuff. And so really the topic of reclaiming the narrative of Black love came from just all my conversations with people last year on IG Lives and personally. And so I kind of was able to kind of culminate and put together just all the different things that I came across in my dialogue with people. And I really wanted to kind of put it in another thing people don't know about me in a simple way, as simple as possible, because I know relationships and things can feel complicated. And I figured what not would be a nice way to go ahead and basically take what I've learned and put it basically in a nice nutshell for you all, kind of tied up in a bow, so that way we can talk about it easily tonight. And so the way I want to kind of start off our conversations is to kind of introduce reclaiming the Black narrative in myths, right? So there's a lot of things that is said about our culture and said about our people. And y'all know I'm the relationship expert, so I like to focus on the relationship aspect of that. And so one of the things that had come up a lot in my conversations with individuals last year on Black love was how, I'm going to go ahead and put the topic, just for those of you that are just joining us. Our topic is Black love, reclaiming the narrative. I'm going to go ahead and start with our first myth. So I'm going to basically introduce different myths that I've heard and talked to other people about, and we're going to go ahead and bust those myths tonight. And that's going to be how we are going to reclaim the narrative. Because as we know, as Black and brown folk, our stories have been told to us, right? And so this is our way, or my way, to start the conversation with you all on how we can reclaim that and make the narrative our own, rather than people telling us what it is. And so that being said, let's go ahead and start off with the first myth. So the first myth is that Black love is only about romantic relationships. And so if you've been following my IG lives or any of my content online, I focus on this quite a bit because I focus on relationships. And honestly, most of my clientele are about romantic relationships. However, we know we are social beings and we're communal people. And so romantic relationships are just one part of our lives, not all of it. And so when we think about Black love, though, the way it's talked about is usually talked about in the romantic sense. You know, and I think we kind of know why, because that's the more kind of popular, obvious way that people think about relationships. But as we know, we have friends, family, colleagues, different people in our lives who we hold near and dear to our hearts. And that's not, the only form of Black love that we experience, although that may be the one that we see on social media or the media most often. So I definitely want to, with you all tonight, bust that myth that Black love is only about romantic relationships. If you've come to any of my lives, you've probably heard about what I call my circles, my relationship circles, I guess, or concentric circles, and how every relationship can be depicted in the circles, right? So the first is your relationship with yourself. Then the next circle out is with your partner if you are in a romantic relationship. And then the family you were born in, right? Parents, siblings, caregivers. And then the family that, friendships, I should say. And then maybe colleagues and community, depending on how far out you go in that concentric circles. And the importance of that concept is not only to illustrate the fact that Black love is not just romantic, but that all the relationships affect each other. When we think about relationships, whether it's family or partners, it's usually important to us that people in our life kind of get along, right? And the reason for that is because not only is our romantic relationships important, but also other people in our lives are also important. And so that's why we experience that, but we don't necessarily talk about it in the popular sense. And so I definitely want to go ahead and bust the myth that Black love is only about relationships, because it's not. And I want to go ahead and encourage you all to jump in the comments as well. I'm going to be, looking around to see if anybody has any comments. And if y'all have any myths that you've heard of, I'm not going to go into all of them because there's a lot. I'm only going to go over 5. But if you have any that you want to drop in the chat, I will definitely read them aloud so people can hear, because I think it's important for us to share content and information that, we hear that's just not true, and we should stop saying it, basically. So the next myth we're going to go into is Black celebrities are the highest examples of Black love. All right. So again, I'm going to use social media a lot because I'm on social. Y'all are on social clearly with me, right? So that is something that's really, really popular, right? And so actually the next myth is going to go into this a little bit too. But the idea is basically that, yes, we see how beautiful celebrities are and how much access and assets they have, and how when they come together, it looks beautiful, right? So I'm not going to take away the beauty of what we see online with these relationships. However, as some of y'all may have seen in my other chats or lives, or maybe have just seen in my content, or maybe you just have heard this before, or thought of it, that when you think about your actual life, we don't know these celebrities most of the time. So to have them as the highest examples of Black love obviously is not, let's say, the best thing. It's not the worst thing, right? But it's not the best thing because, one, we don't really have access to them in terms of knowing how their relationship really is. We just see what's posted online. And then we usually see what looks like, the love story part and then some type of breakup if there is a breakup, right? You just see like the polarizing points of that relationship. And so we know in real life, it doesn't go that way, right? And so to have Black celebrities be the highest examples is not the healthiest thing, because it doesn't give us a range of what real relationships actually look and feel like. And they only, obviously share what they choose to share with the public or what's found out about them, rather than if it's someone in your personal life that you actually observe in their relationships and see how they actually communicate, how they argue, how they care for each other, versus in the celebrity examples is just photos of them going on trips and having cute babies. I think it's about where it stops. And so, that story has no depth, and we know that we have more depth than what that looks like. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the third myth. And again, please go ahead and join me in the chat. Go ahead and share any myths that you've heard of so we can bust those myths together. The next myth is relationship goals is what Black men and women should be striving for in their relationships. So like I said, this is a little bit of an extension from the Black celebrities. I didn't make it a separate myth just because, we can see relationship goals in celebrities and kind of how it's promoted online and things. However, we can also see just other examples and media that's out there as far as what relationship goals are, even if they're not celebrities. So I think for me, when I think of relationship goals, it's more the materialistic part of it. Although it is important to, have obviously financial sustainability and be secure in your finances, it's not all of what relationships are about, right? And so we also have success as part of it, but also success is subjective. I think usually when we see what is promoted as far as like relationship goals and stuff like that, it's either materialistic, it talks about success, but also keeping in mind that if we're having someone else's relationship be our relationship goals, then we're gonna lose out on the nuance or the subjectivity of our own experience, right? So if we see someone or a couple that is, excelling in something, which is great, but at the same time, if that's not necessarily our path or our desire or even our interest, then to have that be a measurement of what we think, is best, or what we want for ourselves is not necessarily the healthiest way, because it's not what goes with us, right? So relationship goals should really be what's specific to you and your partner, rather than it be kind of like, and I put it in quotes because relationship goals is kind of like a term that's used a lot, but not what's promoted as far as what it looks like online. Instead, it should be what we, basically as our individuals and our couples selves define as relationship goals. So in a nutshell, the myth is relationship goals is what we should strive for, but really the twist to that is you define your own relationship goals. You know what I mean? You define what it is with your partner, for yourself, first of all, of course, what you want, what they want, and then bring that together. And so that's why it's a myth, because we look at the image and we look at that as what we strive for, but really it should be our own personal goals and relationship goals within ourselves, because it looks different, and I see that in couples a lot as well, seeing couples that they just all look and operate differently. So we shouldn't treat it all the same, basically. So the next myth is, and I'm gonna check the chat real quick to see, I see some encouraging comments for me here. I really appreciate that. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on to our next myth, which is myth number 4. Black men are aggressive and only care about themselves. And so this is one, I really want to spend a little bit of time on this one and the next one as well. The first 3 are ones that I've pretty much talked about in my lives and things like that, but the next 2 are ones that I haven't talked about as directly, let's just say. And so for myth number 4, Black men are aggressive and only care about themselves, it's important to kind of dissect that, right? Because oftentimes when something is said a lot, like in a community or a social circle, or just anything where there's people kind of sharing information, a lot of times something is experienced and then it's just repeated, right? And then so in psychology, something called confirmation bias, basically that if we see something, if we believe something, let's say, and then we see something to believe to be, if we experience something and then we see something to prove that it's true, then we're just going to keep saying it's true. Basically, that's the fancy way of saying it. And so rather than us look for things to challenge our views, we look for things to confirm our views. Basically, that's why it's called confirmation bias. So if we experience someone, let's say a Black man, to be aggressive, and then we start saying, well, Black men are aggressive, then obviously that's something that can be repeated over and over again. And then people just start believing it. And then if a Black man does get upset, he's aggressive, right? When Black men are people just like everybody else, and they have a range of emotions like everybody else, and they are entitled to feel angry or upset just like anybody else. And so oftentimes, it's something that is said repeatedly and kind of used as a judgment, basically. And so if they do have feelings that are on the side of anger or upset, then it's automatically being aggressive. And we have to be mindful of that, because feeling angry and feeling upset is a feeling, and then aggressive is a behavior, right? Or being aggressive is a behavior. And so if we take someone's feeling, right, what they feel on the inside, and they may be saying, expressing how they're upset and turning that into their behavior being aggressive, then that's where the myth comes in that one, right? So just to break it down a little bit further, I see people are joining me in the chat here. So we're working on myths. And so we're on myth number 4. Black men are aggressive and only care about themselves. So I put it in 2, like in 1, but it's really 2. So I'm focusing on the Black men being aggressive part. And so what I was just saying is that, anger is a feeling we all experience, including, Black men, as well as being upset, anything that's in that spectrum of feeling. And so we want to differentiate between an internal feeling and then someone's actions. And so for Black men, if they are told because they feel angry or because they're expressing that they feel angry, they're automatically aggressive, then that's a dangerous myth, right? And so we know in our culture that that's been something that's been held against them, and obviously increases their people perceiving them as threats. And obviously that can be a challenge for them as a whole, but also in relationships as well, because part of relationships is you have to express how you feel, right? And for those of you that don't know, my primary way I work with couples and relationships is through their emotions. And so one of the challenges that I do face in couples therapy is that with men, and most of my clients are Black. I do have some interracial couples and things, but most of my clients are Black, and most of the men I see are Black. And so a lot of the times the challenges of being able to get people to express their emotions in general is a challenge. However, when we think about the fact that men are socialized to not express their emotions as much, all men, right? But then we think about the racial component of Black men and how they are brought up and socialized. There's obviously a nuanced part there because of their race. That they are not necessarily comfortable always expressing their emotions. That's my experience in couples therapy. And then when they get to a point of expressing, let's say, anger, for example, then that can be something that can be used against them. And I've seen it happen in front of me, right, in therapy. And so that's a challenge because as a couples therapist who focuses on emotions to get through to people and to help them connect, anger is part of it. Like, it's part of what people feel. And so trying to find a way to balance between getting people to feel comfortable, including Black men, to express themselves, and then to let them know it's okay to be angry, and then to let their partner know, who's usually a woman, because I see mostly heterosexual relationships, that it's okay for him to be angry. That's a whole other conversation I have to have. And just to back up, before I do all this, I make sure it's a safe space and that the couple can tolerate the challenge. But in my treatment, as I'm talking to people, I think about the social and the racial implications of that, because by the time they come to me, they're grown people, they're grown adults. And so they've already developed their mechanisms of how they deal with their emotions. And so in the back of my mind, particularly for the Black men myth part, that's something that not only is told to us, but also one that we kind of circulate even in our own community. And so having to make sure that men feel comfortable enough to express their emotions, including anger. And then also to say that just because they feel angry doesn't mean that they are aggressive, right? I think that's the piece that's the hardest part of it, is that not only are they told that they can't have any emotions, and that if they do have one, if they have anger feelings, then it's looked at as aggressive, right? And I know obviously that is a concern for people in terms of if the person's actually being aggressive, but having to dissect the fact that, like, just because they're saying or expressing their tone of voice as being upset, that is not necessarily something that is aggressive or a threat, right? And that's a delicate balance to strike for sure. But it is important to do that, to make sure that, especially when I'm working with couples, for them to feel comfortable enough to share that with each other. The second part of it is Black men are aggressive and only care about themselves. I think this is, kind of goes back to the emotion piece of it. Honestly, what I see as far as just being able to get people to express how they feel. So I think that's why I kind of put it together, because I feel like that's just part of how men are socialized as well, is having a challenge to express themselves just in general, past maybe defending themselves. Probably the one that we see the most, which is why they're seen as aggressive too, because that's the one they're kind of socialized to feel like that's okay for them to express, but when they do, it's a problem, right? And so having to kind of dig deeper and look at them as people, and not just as threats or any of those type of things, is important, because we want to make sure that we can see what's behind the behaviors that they're exhibiting, is not just looking at it on the surface or looking at what society says that it is, right? So it does take, and even honestly, I will also add to this piece too, that even the men themselves, like the men I work with, for example, have to look within themselves too, to kind of figure out where it comes from, because a lot of times we all experience this. The way we're socialized and brought up, we kind of operate on autopilot, and we don't always understand why we do things we do and what triggers it and that kind of thing. We just kind of go with whatever we are used to. And so to have to kind of look at ourselves, I should say, sometimes is a challenge, as well. And so for them to kind of think about sometimes, or even to feel comfortable to be able to share how they're feeling past some of these stereotypes, so to speak, becomes a challenge, right? Because the other side of that is, as people are doing this, and we're talking about Black men in particular right now, then that means they have to be vulnerable, right? They have to be vulnerable. And it's not that they can't be vulnerable. It's just that they may have some challenges. And I should say this, men and women, Black men and women included, have challenges being vulnerable. So that should be also a myth as well. So it's not only men, women too. I think it just looks different. And so it's important to be able to dissect that as well, that, it's hard to be vulnerable. And so anything that's not anger, because anger is usually a defensive emotion, anything that's not anger is usually, vulnerable. So fear, sadness, any of those type of things. So if they're not socialized or put in settings where they're said that it's okay or supported in those emotions, then how are they going to know that it's okay to do that? So we want to make sure to bust this myth that it is okay for Black men to feel all emotions, including anger. And just because they feel angry, it does not mean they're aggressive. Okay. So anger is an emotion and aggressive is a behavior. So we want to make sure we separate that. All right. So on to myth number 5. So I have 5 myths, y'all, for those that just joined me, just to recap what we're talking about. And I'll go ahead and go through them. At least I'll list them out before we wrap up. But basically what we're doing is reclaiming the narrative of Black love. And the way I wanted to present that to y'all tonight is basically going through 5 myths that we hear, popular ones that kind of get circulated, and how that obviously impacts our Black love narrative in a negative way. And we want to go ahead and reclaim that, right? So I'm just helping to start the conversation tonight. Oh, I see some chat. So let me go ahead and look at the comments, y'all. So as I was recapping. All right. So I have Cozy says, is the idea they're Black, they understand my struggle accurate? Okay. Someone being Black as like, oh, I should actually just show y'all this. Let me see. I'm all reading it to y'all. I can show y'all. See, I'm getting used to YouTube here. So this is Cozy's comment. Is the idea they're Black, they understand my struggle accurate? Someone being Black as like may not necessarily translate into understanding empathy. Oh, very true. I agree. I agree with that. Very true. Just because someone is Black does not necessarily mean they're going to understand your struggle. I think that there is a communal or community experience that we do have, but some of us interpret it different than others. That's kind of how I would say. So we do want to know that not all kinfolk is kinfolk, I guess is how they say it. So we do want to have a community experience and acknowledge that there is one, but people have different perspectives in what they experience. So I would definitely say that there's some nuances to that for sure. Another comment, I'm going to hop around. Yes. And so Haitian Speed, thank you so much. Men aren't allowed to be vulnerable. And so we have some men in the chat, and I see better yet, it's not accepted. So thank y'all for confirming that this is a myth, that, you know, it's not that men don't have feelings or that they are aggressive. It's just that they aren't feeling comfortable or allowed to have a range of emotions in their environments and their relationships. And so we want to be able to increase that space for them to be able to do that, right? Because the thing about relationships is that it takes 2 or more people, right? And so if in some relationships, the heterosexual ones, or if you're same sex and you're both male, if there's a male involved in the relationship and they're socialized not to express their emotions or not to feel accepted, and that anytime they do express an emotion, that it's looked at as aggressive, or, not taken seriously even, then that causes a problem. And like I said, I've experienced this in my heterosexual couples in my relationship, or couples counseling, where it does take time for men to express their emotions verbally in sessions. I will say though, that I am always pleasantly surprised for those men that do stick with it, that they do end up getting a lot out of the sessions because they basically gotten to a point of breakthrough where they feel at least comfortable in the couples therapy space, to be able to express themselves more than maybe they have before. So obviously men have the capacity to, because they experience it. It's just a matter of giving them the environments to be able to share that with us, so we can, give them that space to do that. And then we also have another comment here. I'm coming from the point of view that we shouldn't take shortcuts with discussing things or making the mistake of thinking we understand our partner simply because we share the same race. Yeah, so back to that point. I agree. And I know that I focus a lot on Black love. I'm actually going to address this a little bit. Thank you for the comment, Cozy. I'm actually going to go ahead and address it. I'm going to put the topic for those of you that are joining us and that are still with us. So the topic tonight is Black love, reclaiming the narrative. So some of the comments that were shared was basically the idea that just because we're Black doesn't necessarily mean that we understand each other. Yes. yes. I agree with that 100%, right? Because obviously as Black people, we're not a monolithic group. Like we're not all the same. Yes, in America, they lump us, in one. I know for me, I'm Haitian American. And so, growing up, we'll have to check boxes and forms and things even till today. I only got one box to check. It's a Black African American box, right? I don't feel comfortable checking other because that doesn't feel right to me. So yes, I think that is a great comment to talk about how Black people are not all one. So because we're not all the same, I should say, Black people are not all the same. That's why, as your point to Cozy saying on the chat, that's why just because you're Black doesn't mean you're going to necessarily understand and relate to one another. I think the piece that the Black love conversations and reclaim the narrative tonight is more about looking at what we do experience that are similar, but also to look at what we may not understand about even each other, right? And like to have that conversation, because I think what happens is, and this all people do this, not just Black people, we don't understand each other, we judge each other, right? And so if we judge each other, then that's not going to create a space to have more conversations or to connect. That's just going to get people to be defensive, and just more separation happens. And so my efforts in having the Black conversations is definitely to create a community, to look at the things that we are already doing amazingly well, and to continue that. And then the things that we're not, like the myths tonight, have a real honest conversations about it. And tonight's conversation, like many of my other ones, are some of them are just introductions, and my hope is to have way more deeper conversations around it. But I just want to introduce it. So I agree, just because you're Black doesn't mean you understand each other on everything, because they're not the same. But there is obviously a similarity that we share because we have the same race or culture if you come from the same culture. So thank you for saying that, because that's actually important. Now, I didn't think I would get into that tonight. I was going to just go straight to the myths, but that's why I love the chat. So I appreciate it. I see some more comments. Let's see. Oh, let me go back to that. Thank you, Carter Therapy, my colleague with me in the building. Such a much needed conversation. So happy to have professionals like you to help you announce the myths. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you so much, Carter Therapy. I actually have an announcement about me and Carter Therapy later on this evening. So yes, this is an important conversation. So as I was saying, I promote Black love conversations because I think it's one that we do have, but also I think a lot of times they're had with the myths that we talked about tonight. They're polarizing, and they also are not talked about with professionals as much. I know a lot of times the public talks about it, which I think is important because we just need to talk as people. But also I just want to offer to the conversation, like doing couples therapy with Black couples, and because I feel like I have a unique perspective because I'm kind of behind the curtain, so to speak. And so, but obviously I'm a Black woman, I'm married, I'm in the community like everyone else. So I kind of feel like I have two perspectives to kind of work with. And so that's my offer to you all with these conversations. And so, but it's not just my view. I want y'all to kind of chime in as well. All right. So we are on number 5. And I left this one for last because this one is actually a loaded one, but I'm just going to go ahead and take the plunge tonight because hopefully, you all will stay with me. So the myth number 5 that we want to dismantle, as my colleague Brittany said, Black women are undesirable. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. All right. So this is one that I'm sure y'all have heard in some form or fashion, right? It's either the Black women are undesirable actually has been written articles too, by the way. I'm sure y'all probably seen, not just talk about on social media. But this is one that's also presented in different ways. So it's presented as Black women are too independent. That's one, right? So that's undesirable because anything that's too much, right? That's undesirable. Or Black women are aggressive too. Or angry, right? That's another one. Black women are what's another one? So too independent. And y'all help me in the chat. All right, I think I have somebody helping me. In terms of aggression, okay, this is an aggression comment. I'll read that in a minute. But in terms of the undesirable comment or myth that people say about Black women, they're undesirable for a few different reasons. They say things like they're too independent, they're too strong even, they sometimes even too educated. I've heard that. So anything that's too much is obviously not necessarily presented in a positive light, but that is something that, has been said. So y'all see my face, right? So this is an important part of the conversation because it's one that is presented as being backed up by statistics. Let me say that, right? But as hopefully some of y'all know, Black women have attitudes. Thank you, Brittany. I appreciate that. Black women have attitudes. Yes. They should just say we're passionate, right, Brittany? Like, not that we have attitudes. But yes. And let me back up and say that. Like comment to the Black women have attitudes part. So this goes to just in general as a Black community. If we think about our counterparts, like how I was saying earlier, that Black men are seen as aggressive. Usually if they feel angry, they're automatically aggressive, like that whole thing. If you think about our community as a whole, compared to our counterparts, we are not allowed to have pretty much any emotion except look happy, right? And so any emotion that doesn't look happy makes people feel uncomfortable. Usually, our counterparts feel uncomfortable, right? Non-Black people, and so if someone is excited or passionate or assertive, even, right? And assertive is supposed to be a good trait, right? It's automatically put in a category of being threatening or being not a team player if you're at work, or just anything that, like, doesn't seem like you want to get along. If you have boundaries, even becomes an issue. So the whole Black women have attitudes, Black men are aggressive. That's pretty much speaks to the fact that we're not allowed to have emotions, which is insane, because everyone else is able to. And so this is the reason why we don't want to perpetuate these myths, right? We want to be able to dismantle them, so when we experience them or hear about them, we can kind of talk to it, right? Or men asking a Black woman to smile, implying that she isn't happy. I like this one. So let me go ahead and I should have showed y'all. Thank you, Brittany, for that. Black women have attitudes. Love the photo too. And then Haitian Speed says, or men asking a Black woman to smile, implying that they aren't happy. Yeah, right. And this is a nuanced piece because I'm from South Florida, right? So as a woman, I think it's challenging to sometimes navigate certain spaces, right? And so oftentimes, we're taught to find ways to protect ourselves or keep ourselves out of trouble, so to speak, right? And so smiling is one of those things that, like, it's supposed to may invite people to talk to you. You don't want to talk to you, right? But then if you don't smile, like Haitian Speed just says, that's an issue, because the person that wants to talk to you wants to see you smile. And everybody else is like, why are you smiling? You're smiling too much, right? So there seems like it's like, you damned if you do, you damned if you don't. So I appreciate the conversation about that. And actually, I'm going to go back up. I know I'm hopping around, but hopefully y'all still with me. I'm going to go hop back up to another comment before I go to number 5's myth, because we were talking about aggression with Black men, so I want to address that before I go more into the women. Haitian Speed says, in terms of aggression, I find it difficult to help people for the fear that they may, so you're a man, so I see where you're coming from with this. Help me feel afraid that they may be afraid of me, like helping someone change a tire. It makes it difficult to be a part of the community. And let me say, I have a lot of great men in my family, thank goodness, right? And so a lot of these comments are things that I've heard from them talk about over the years. And that's a challenge, right? Like, because if you're raised to be a gentleman, or you're raised to, like, help. I've even heard like men I know, like growing up in my family and stuff, saying that, like, sometimes they don't want to be too nice to women because the women are going to think they're going to hit on them or something like that, right? Like if you open a door or you do something like that, it's like on it. So the women are told, don't smile to invite any trouble, so to speak. But if you don't smile, you're not smiling enough. And then men are told, like, or not told, but are perceived that if they're helping someone, they're either a threat or they're trying to come on to them, which is, basically putting men in the category of either being an aggressive, man, or being, too overly advancing or sexualizing. So that's unfortunate, because people are definitely multifaceted and we shouldn't put ourselves in those boxes, right? Some of it is the world that we live in, so we do have to be careful, but we also want to think about how we perpetuate the myths, though, right? Because it's just something happens once doesn't mean that it's true, right? Or even if it happens a few times doesn't mean that it's a fact. And I think that's the piece where the myths have to come in. So y'all just making me talk tonight. I appreciate it. I thought I was gonna go through this pretty presentation, but hopefully y'all still with me. So we are on myth number 5, and myth number 5, like I said, Black women are undesirable. Brittany was helping me in the chat. Black women have attitudes, or we are told, too educated, too independent, anything that's too much, right? That's undesirable. So what I was saying was that this is a interesting one, so to speak, because the other ones I presented are things that people say kind of like anecdotally. So like people say they've experienced it before, they see a pattern, it's promoted, it's talked about, but there's not really anything really to back it up. And the reason this one I left to the end, because it's kind of loaded because of the fact that it actually has, I don't say it has statistics that people use to back it up. Let me say it like that. So there is something called the racial marriage gap. I'm not sure if y'all heard of it before, but basically is the idea that, there's a gap between Black people, just Black people in general, start there, and non-Black people in terms of like marriage rates, right? And when it comes to Black women, there's even more of a gap, let's say, right, to some of the numbers. And so when you look at it, so let me just go off with the main statistic that this kind of supports, or people use to support it, that the percentage of Black, so in 2019, the report came out, I think the census in 2020, something like that, around that time, basically that the marriage rates for Black people, well, the marriage rates for everyone in the country went down. This is US. And the rates for Black people went down. And then for Black women, it went down further, like more. And so things like those stats and other like online dating app reports and things like that, that has other like nuances to it. We could talk about another day. But basically, so people read these numbers, right? And then they create a story behind it, right? And so if you've done research before or familiar with just how it works, that's part of research, is to do reports, do the research, get the numbers, and then tell a story. Now, the problem is that if we tell stories that are only one-sided and that perpetuate stereotypes and don't tell the whole story, but then we keep saying them and then we put numbers behind it to say it's true, then people are going to start believing it, and it's going to continue to be said over and over again. And so, for example, because there's more other reports and stuff, I'm going to use a marriage one to kind of make the point that, so because Black women's marriage rates are less than Black men, and also less than other groups or whatever, this is what's been talked about, like, spread around, let me say. And that's really, really damaging, right? Because as I looked at numbers closely, because those that know me know I'm detail oriented. So I was like, I need to see what this is about. And so there's numbers within numbers, like there's so much stuff. But the piece of it, like, for example, that they didn't talk about is that like the reasons or some of the things that as to why Black women are currently married less. And so one of the things that came out to be was that Black women are more widowed. Y'all hear me? Black women are more widowed than, of course, Black men, right? And any other race or gender. Okay. And so in terms of percentage, of course. So when you hear that, there's way more to this: divorce, separation, there's other things, right? But that stuck out to me the most. And the reason that stuck out to me the most is because we know a lot of things that happen to our Black men as to why they don't survive as long as Black women do, right? Again, there's a lot of things we can go into that, but I think y'all know where I'm going with it. And so that's really concerning, right? Because there are not just that Black women are more widowed, but there's other things in the report. There's other stuff behind our history and things that speak to why Black women are not married at a certain percentage or comparable to other groups and stuff. And this is what they come up with. They come up with that we're not desirable. And it's like mind-blowing, right? And these are things that are really, I even been checking it before this live just to see like how popular this is, and people are still talking about it like it's something that is said in all groups, including our own, right? And so it's important for us to know what's really behind some of these things, and not to just assume that because something looks a certain way, like, okay, there's a number as far as like this is how many the percentage is, but then there's no discussion about all the nuances that play a part in it, or minimal discussion. And then we keep saying it. How does that really affect us psychologically, right? As Black women, right? Because we're being told we're not desirable, right? And on the other end, Black men hearing it, right? And so that doesn't even get into like all the things within, like Cozy was saying, like just because we're all Black, we all can understand each other all the time, like empathy and stuff like that. But when we hear things like this that are simply not true, and this continues to be talked about, then that just creates a larger problem for us. Not just us within like the, us and our counterparts, but just us within us, because the things that we're told, right? Because tonight's topic, let me go ahead and remind y'all, tonight's topic is Black love, reclaiming the narrative, right? That's our topic for tonight. So for the last myth that Black women are undesirable, we're going to bust that myth. And of course, all the people that I know in my life, myself, I would not say that that's a thing, right? Oh, I don't, my girlfriends, my aunts, my people, myself. Oh no, I'm not undesirable, right? But what I want to highlight, though, right, is that there's a point in which we're socialized to a certain degree, and the way these myths come out in ourselves and our relationships are sometimes more subtle, and we don't realize how much it really affects us and how we interact with each other. And so I think it's really important to look at these myths and really look at it with a close eye and not just assume that just because you hear something is true. And I know a lot of times we know on a I feel like most of the time we do know on a intellectual level or a cognitive level that's not true because we can find examples that it's not. But the ways that we know that it seeps into our culture is how we treat each other. More specifically, how we treat each other when we're not happy with each other. That's really when you know, right? Because things are being said. And of course, there's a personal component, right? Within that relationship of two people, there's personal things being said. But there's also things that kind of creep in that we don't always realize. And so if we continue to repeat that or act on it, we may not repeat it with our mouth, but we act on it, then that doesn't necessarily help. Or if we hear it and we don't dismantle it, we let people say it, wherever part that we're in, then that helps to continue a narrative that is not helpful to our community, right? So that's why we need to reclaim it. I'm going to go ahead and check the chat and see if there's any comments for the rest of the night. Let's see. That's all social media pushing opinions through. Yeah, it's partial, right? It's not all the information. So that's really important. So I'm going to go ahead and recap the myths for tonight. So that way, for those of you that joined us or just maybe missed the first couple ones. Again, the topic is Black love, reclaiming the narrative. And then we went over, so I wanted to introduce it to you all as far as myths that are popular, that's been spread around, and that they're just not true. And so we want to be able to dismantle those and not repeat them or act on them at all. Myth number 1 is Black love is only about romantic relationships. And we know that we have more in our lives than just romantic relationships. That's an obvious one, I feel like. It's obvious, but I think we don't talk about it as much as the romantic. So let me just say it like that in the media and things. Myth number 2, Black celebrities are the highest examples of Black love, right? So we look at them as sometimes examples, role models, and those type of things, but we don't know these people, right? So we can't necessarily look at them as the highest examples. We don't know what happens behind closed doors, right? And then myth number 3 kind of goes number 2, but a little separate. Relationship goals is what Black men and women should be striving for in their relationships. That's a myth because mostly when we talk about relationship goals in social media and online and different things, we see more materialistic, we see success, we see financial, all these different things. People look good and pretty and hot, and that's nice, but we know that there's more to relationships than these relationship goals that's told to us or presented to us. So we got to get our own goals, basically, right? Look at your partner in the eye, look at yourself in the mirror in the eye, whatever you got to do. And what are your personal goals, right? That's the important part. Myth number 4, Black men are aggressive and only care about themselves. I went in on this a little bit about emotions and how, socialized, and they're looked at as being aggressive if they're angry, and they're allowed to be angry like everybody else, and that they only care about themselves. And that goes back to the lack of, there's basically them being socialized to not express as much. And so the connection sometimes is missing, and it's not because they don't care, it's because they just haven't been learned or taught how to connect in a vulnerable way, right? They may take care of you, they may do certain things, they may show you in a physical way, but the emotional connection part may feel like it's not there as much. So it may feel like they don't care, right? So that's important. And then the last one is, we just went over, is Black women are undesirable. And this one I just talked about a statistic that is a number, but doesn't tell you the whole story, right? And so if you miss anything, I do hope that you watch the replay, because I'm going to have it on the YouTube channel. Please share it with others. I appreciate everyone that came tonight. I have a couple more things before we wrap up, but please share it with others. I really want to have this conversation with you all, because I feel like I really have a unique perspective in terms of being a couples therapist with Black couples, being married myself, being a Black woman, being a Haitian woman. So there's a lot of parts of myself I feel like I can bring to the table in having this conversation. And so I think the more people are part of it, like tonight, you all were great with all the comments, had me bouncing all over the place as usual. And so I like to incorporate it in the conversation. Okay. And so for those who have been to my lives before, I know I have to wrap up with this one last question. And so even if you voted before, vote again. Vote every time you come, because it makes the conversation lively. And so the question is, honesty versus compassion. Which would you choose, right? So if you had to pick one, go ahead and drop it in the chat. I had this question with other guests and stuff previously. It's always an interesting way to end the show, because it may make you feel like you don't want to choose, right? But I think is a fun way to kind of see where people land, right? If you really, really had to choose honesty or compassion. So Brittany says honesty, honesty. I love it. Anyone else? So we got honesty. I try to tally it up sometimes to see who's going to win. So we have 2 honesties in the building. Anybody else? 100% honesty. Yes. Anyone else? Anyone else? So I'll go ahead and vote myself. I'll put myself in the chat here. Compassion. So y'all can see mine on the screen. We got JP says compassion. We got compassion. Thank you, JP. Compassion. So we got 2 compassions, 2. Oh, we tied tonight. Someone's gonna break the tie. We got 2 honesties and 2 compassions. Who's gonna break it? Anybody want to vote? This is important. So if you all follow my IG, I did post something today. There was a guest of ours that we had, Dr. Johnson, who had a wonderful answer. I'm not going to tell you what the answer is. I wish I had to go and listen to it. I posted it today, a wonderful answer explaining why he chose what he chose. And so I have people texting me honesty. Text me in the chat, y'all, so I can see. Got my phone here. I appreciate it. So I have 3 honesties. I guess I don't know if I should use that vote. I need someone to vote in the chat, but I have honesty on my phone here, people listening in. So I'm going to go ahead and let y'all continue voting. We got compassion. So we got 3 on 3. We're still tied. This is amazing. See, that's why this is a hard question to answer, because it feels like, when I feel like they both are important, I know, but it's a good way to see what you would lead with. Let's say in therapy, we like to say, what are you going to lead with? Because that tells a lot about where we stand on things. And for mine is compassion. I'll put my answer on here. I always say compassion, so hopefully y'all know me by now. And that's important to me. It's actually one of the things I actually use in therapy in terms of like skills and also connection with people is self-compassion and compassion. It's not letting people comment. Thanks, guys. So people are texting me. Thank y'all. I'm not sure why people are not able to comment, so we'll check on that later. But thank y'all for listening. And so what I was saying was compassion. I always choose. I just feel like when people are in their feelings, they can't hear you, even if it's the truth, right? And so people tend to get out their feelings when they feel compassion and no judgment, right? So the way that I get to compassion with my client, to honesty with my clients, and if there's a therapist in the book, I know Carter Therapy is a therapist, obviously. That's one of the interesting things about being a therapist, right? Is like, is your client going to tell you the truth? and what happens in that case, right? And so I'm not answer that. Usually we just go with what they say, and if we feel like it's not all of it, then we'll do a gentle challenge to see kind of like, and I guess I'm speaking for myself, type of therapist I am, and so then we'll see if they will. But we don't know because we're not in their lives. But I do know that I have felt working with people in couples therapy and individual therapy that I feel like they're more authentic and more genuine, which is a form of honesty, when they feel like they're not being judged. So I just can't shake the compassion part, y'all. But if you're an honesty person, don't change for me. Keep your honesty. That makes the conversation lively. So please keep doing that. But all in all, I'm going to go. Oh, we got an honesty in the building. Franz Joseph honesty. So we got 1, 2. Let me tally up real quick. 3. We had an honesty I think we had an honesty on my phone. Yep, 4. So we have 4 honesties. And then we got 1, 2, 3. And I think I had a compassion on the phone. I think we still might be tied, y'all. That's so crazy. Okay. Well, that's what makes it fun. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and, I got another honesty. I think honesty's winning. No, I'm kidding. Keep it coming. Let's see what we got. Edna got an honesty. Franz 1. We got 2, 3. No, that was 4. My bad, y'all. 4, 5. So 5 honesties. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And 4 compassions. All right. It's a little sad day for the compassion people, but that's all right. Thank y'all for joining. This was fun. I switched over to IG to YouTube. And I actually like YouTube a lot better because I can see the comments and engage with you guys better. But that being said, I want to wrap up with an special announcement. So most of y'all should know. I'm actually going to put my information at the bottom. Oh, I should go back to the comments and take Brittany off here. Yeah. Thank you, Brittany, for all your comments. and take off the compassion. Where are we here? Yeah, so we're done with the honesty and compassion. Thank y'all. My information is at the bottom. And so for those of you that don't know, I am a licensed mental health counselor, licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of Florida. I see all my clients, individual and couples, virtually, but I am going to be doing an in-person event. I'm super excited. I'll next time I'm gonna see if I can put the flyer up. But if you're not following my IG page, please do. It's Heartfelt Counseling Center is my IG name. It's at the bottom. But I want to go ahead and announce that I am doing an in-person event with my colleague, Brittany Carter. She was just on the chat with us from Carter Therapy. The topic, as you see on the screen, is called You Are Worthy. It is a women's retreat. So we're going to be focusing on Black and brown women in terms of increasing, working through their self-worth and increasing some self-worth as well. I do want to share a little bit about how this came up. And so a lot of times, Brittany and I have similar groups that we serve as far as like Black women, brown women, that kind of stuff. And we focus on self-care, relationships. So we have a lot of similarities there. So this came up in terms of our conversations on how we can serve more women and serve them in person, because we do a lot of virtual work. And wanted to create an experience. And so I talk a lot about self-compassion. And so self-compassion is basically the idea of being your own best friend, right? And when you're feeling down, to lift yourself up, just as if you would your friend, right? Like you be compassionate towards people when they're having a hard time. Now, self-worth is something that's been coming up in a lot of my work with people, in that they've been able to get to a point of, okay, if I'm having a bad time, don't be hard on myself, don't beat myself up. I'm queen, all these things, right? These wonderful affirmations. And there's this part that I'm finding that people are still not feeling full and happy. And so I was trying to figure out what was missing. And I started introducing this. Oh, Carter Therapy says hi to everybody. This is her. She's actually going to be joining me. I'm going to make another announcement about that in my next live. But yeah, she'll be joining me. And so basically the idea is that I was introducing this topic of, and so was Brittany, about self-worth to our clients, and it was hitting for people. And it's one of those concepts that are very abstract and big, right? Or deep, however you want to look at it. But I really felt passionate, and so did Brittany, about bringing this in-person event to people to be able to have an experience. It's an intimate space, so it's not going to be like a large, a lot of women. It's going to be a few couple, like probably about 10 to 15 women there. And so we want to keep it intimate, but we definitely want to have an experience for people to feel connected to one another, and also just to connect to yourself. Because you don't want to be going through, like working on these things, being successful, working through your relationships, and then still finding like there's a part that feels like it's not quite, not quite there. And so the self-worth piece is one that seemed to resonate for people. And so we wanted to bring it live and in person. And so Brittany and I will be coming, Brittany will be coming to live next week, not next week, in 2 weeks, to talk about it, so we can talk more with y'all about the topic. So that is pretty much it for the night. I will, so just keep following me on IG, subscribe to YouTube, get all the links and stuff and reminders, and share with people. Just share with one person if you can tonight, this live and my page. I so appreciate it, because this needs to be a conversation we all have to have together. All right, y'all. Have a great night. See you next time. Bye.